Sean Combs' legal team is coming out swinging, cross-examining his ex-girlfriend Cassie Ventura for days on the witness stand. The defense is zeroing in on a series of text messages between Ventura and Combs, trying to cast doubt on her claims that she was coerced into so-called freakoffs. Combs denied all allegations against him, and his attorneys are now trying to portray Ventura as a willing participant in what they describe as his swingers lifestyle. One message from Ventura reads, "I'm always ready to freak off." In another, she writes, "The freakoffs felt right. I'll walk you through what happened in court, what's next, and how these messages could impact both sides of this explosive legal battle." Cassie Ventura was back on the stand Friday in the federal racketeering and sex trafficking case against music mogul Sean Diddy Combs. The defense is trying to paint a picture of a complicated but consensual relationship between the two. Ventura testified that Combs beat her and coerced her into having sex with male escorts, sometimes on camera. But Combs' attorneys are pushing back, arguing that Ventura wanted to participate and enjoyed them. According to court transcripts obtained by Law and Crime, in a 2009 exchange nearly 2 years into their relationship, Combs texted, "I miss you already." Ventura replied, "Me too." Combs then asked, "When do you want to freak off?" Ventura answered, "I am just going up to change and put my ring in. I just picked it up. I'm always ready to freak off." Combs wrote, "You tell me the day you choose." Ventura responded, "It can be whenever." He answered, "Name the night." 4 years later, in 2013, Ventura messaged Combs saying, "Wish we could have FO'd before you left," using the initials for freak off. And in 2017, she texted him again, saying she, quote, "Loved their freak-offs." In another exchange, Combs wrote, "I want to freak off right now." Ventura replied, "Me too. Well, I want to have fun with you." Having Ventura read those messages out loud in court was most likely strategic. It's a key moment for the defense, as they work to undermine her claims of coercion, because in this case, it all comes down to consent. For the jury to convict Combs on charges of sex trafficking and racketeering, they must believe force and coercion were involved. The defense also argued that if Miss Ventura was ever hesitant to participate, it wasn't because she was forced, but because she was jealous and wanted more out of the relationship. The attorney asked, "You testified on direct that you were insanely jealous, right?" Ventura responded, "I did say that." "Yeah." The attorney asked, "And you reacted when you saw social media posts of Mr. Combs with other women, right?" Ventura responded, "Yeah." Combs' attorney also brought up Ventura's past comments about Diddy's longtime partner, Kim Porter, who was the mother of 3 of his children. Ventura admitted that she used to resent Diddy spending holidays with his family and Porter instead of her. Ventura wrote to Combs, "I understand you feeling like you need to protect your children, but after a while, for what? It's like, for what? They've never known you and Kim to be together, unless there's something that I just don't know about. They were babies when we started dating. If Chance can go away with her dad and not her mom, I think the other kids can too. The more time that goes by, the harder it is to understand." During the first week of trial, the defense also brought up Diddy's long history of drug abuse, trying to shift the narrative away from a man allegedly running a criminal operation, and instead paint him as someone spiraling out of control from addiction. Ventura testified that Combs' addiction played a role in his mood swings, admitting that at one point he was hospitalized after overdosing. The defense asked, "So, almost the entire duration of your relationship, you were both addicted to painkillers?" Ventura responded, "Very close to it, yeah." The attorney asked, "But periodically withdrawing and being affected by the withdrawal symptoms in your relationship, right?" Ventura responded, "Yep." The attorney asked, "And that was a big part of Mr. Combs' mood swings, right?" Ventura responded, "I don't know if it was a big part, but it was a part." The attorney asked, "You understood that if he did not get his painkillers that he was relying on, that it would affect his mood, right?" Ventura responds, "Yeah. Anybody who's addicted to painkillers is like that." And joining me to talk more about this is federal trial attorney Alexis Rosenberg. Alexis, thank you so much for coming on today. Let's just jump right in. How do you think the defense did, questioning Cassie for hours and hours and hours? So, it's very trying. What they had her testify, obviously, was very sensitive. They're having her read text messages. This is very personal. And coming from someone who had testified, before about what she was an abused woman and having to relive that, under the circumstances and the fact she's so pregnant, I think she did very well. In prosecution, they were arguing that, and Cassie testified to this, that she was abused, that she was raped, that she was coerced, essentially, and did not want to participate in these free golfs. But after reading the text messages and what the defense brought up, it seemed like it was a different picture. They painted a different picture. How do you think the defense is doing to try to counter some of what Miss Ventura said during that testimony? The defense was doing a really good job at chipping away at it. The defense is that, basically, Diddy did abuse her. We have the video. I don't think they're countering that. And he had a public apology, as we know. But he's saying that abusing someone, domestic violence, is not RICO. She wasn't coerced into it. And bringing out those different text messages where she was saying that, she was asking and saying that she liked these free golf, does support that it was not. She wasn't forced into doing it, that she actually enjoyed it. And the question is really, is the jury believing that? Because we do know battered woman syndrome. Sometimes they do things that seem out of the ordinary and contrary to what was really going on, right? And I was just about to ask that. Do you think that the jury believes the defense, or do you think that they're taking the side of the prosecution? Because I feel like everyone is really leaning into Cassie's every word the first couple of days when the prosecution was questioning her, listening to, her what she alleges as abuse, right? And then when they saw those text messages and Miss Ventura said things like, oh, I always want to freak off. She said something along those lines, or, oh, I wish I could freak off right now. Mr. Combs is asking her when she wants to do it, and she's saying whenever you want to. Just seeing those things, how do you think that they're taking it? Well, we'll see ultimately how they take it. But remember, for coercion, you can be consenting and then change. You can change your position that you don't want to do that anymore. Number one. Number two, once we add drugs to the mix, that really does support coercion. If you are drugging someone, that supports the fact that they weren't consenting at the time to what they were doing. So the defense needs to chip away and really go towards that. She was consenting, but the prosecution needs to hammer down that. Yeah. At one point, she may have been consenting and she may, she changed, or that she was just saying this. And I'm assuming they're going to have an expert that's going to come testify about, the psychological aspects of being in this type of relationship. But she also said on the stand that she still has feelings for him, that it's not that she has a hatred towards him, even as she sits there today, which to me was extremely surprising because what we heard when she was testifying for the prosecution, I think I would personally have extreme hatred for him based on that testimony. Well, what do you think that means? I guess, like you said, we're waiting to hear just from an expert that can really touch on the psychology of it all. But the fact that a person that she's claiming did do these things to her, right, did allegedly rape her, allegedly drug her to participate in these freak-offs, and she doesn't hate them. What do you think the expert will say to kind of combat that? I think it would support the fact that someone who has been battered does have that push me, pull me, that you have a situation where somebody doesn't stay in a bad relationship because it is bad all 100% of the time. There has been testimony that he can be very charming. He's a very charming person. It was like a switch. So there had to be some good times that were in those bad times. And the text messages do seem to support that as well. So I think that the testimony from the expert is going to say, yeah, there was this conflicted feeling, this conflicted relationship that was going on, and there was grooming that was done as well. What do you think we can expect to happen next? I know the next witness that's supposed to take the stand is Dawn Richard, and she was in a former group that Diddy had made. What can we expect to hear from that? I think we're going to expect to hear the same, similar of the same, similar. I think each person is going to get up, the victims, and talk about the same pattern and how they were either drugged or coerced. And the prosecution does need to do that. They need to show this coercion. Because right now with her, because this was a long relationship she was in with him. This was over a decade. But the question that the jury is probably asking is, why stay? Why did you keep coming back? So then if we show the next person, and that cumulative is going to get us to the jury, most likely being able to see that there was coercion. And I just want to touch back on what you just said about Cassie and Diddy being in a long relationship. I mean, it was 11 years. In the defense, they showed text messages from 2009, 2013 to 2017, really showing in each of these messages her saying things that she enjoyed the freak-offs. I'm still just trying to figure out, because it seemed like they laid down the foundation. While yes, it's true, like how you mentioned that she does have the right to change her mind, and she does have the right to say no. How exactly does the government prove that? How do we know when she said no? Or how do we know when she did change her mind? If they said that throughout the course of their relationship, she kept saying yes. They have to just put her testimony. I mean, I think her testimony saying that, but it seems to me that her testimony wasn't very, very clear. I think the prosecution may have missed the mark a little bit with the coercion to make it very clear, and that's why you're asking this question right now, which is a very good question. How are you going to get the jury to say, okay, there was coercion, and when did the coercion start and end? And that's going to be a jury question. And that is really why you need that cumulative of the next witness saying, yes, I was drugged. The drugging is a very big element, because if you're drugged, that really goes towards the coercion. Because how did you consent, especially if you didn't know you were being drugged? And we also have her testimony about the fact that she was raped that last time. So we have that situation, which does seem like a very clear divide, because she said she ended the relationship and she was meeting him one last time. And then there was this rape situation that had happened, right? And I think you bring up a good point there with the prosecution seemingly dropping the ball. I mean, the prosecution, they were the ones that handed the defense the text messages. How did they miss this? Why didn't they bring it up when they were first just introducing Cassie or first had Cassie on the stand around? Why wouldn't they kind of just field some of this out and explain it before the defense questioned her? I agree with you. I mean, one of the things that lawyers do, they have to turn over the text messages. They have to do that. It's part of their required discovery disclosures. But you're right. They should have lessened the blow by going ahead and front-ending it and saying, were these text messages letting her explain them in context? Because now it seems the way it was presented, because they didn't disclose those on the front end, that they were trying to hide something. And now there's a smoking gun. And that really should have been done. They should have had her read some of those and say, yeah, and give some context and the ability to say, oh yeah, but you don't know leading up. And she kind of got into this a little bit in her response. But leading up, you don't know what was going on ahead of time leading up to that. And why, for instance, maybe I was scared that he was going to get angry. So I was saying these things to put him in a good mood or whatever it may have been the reason. What does the prosecution have to do to win this case? Well, there's a couple of different things. We have the RICO, but we also have the prostitution, the trafficking end of it. So if we have some testimony about a minor that's being trafficked across state lines, then he could serve some pretty long time in prison for that. So there are a couple of different things that they're floating around for him to go to prison and be convicted. It's not just that RICO claim that we have. We have the trafficking claim as well. And there's been a lot of testimony related to that trafficking claim about that they were bringing the people in. But, a lot of times she was also paying for those sex workers as well, meaning she was personally paying them. So there has to be testimony. Where was the money coming? Was it directed from him and all that? Which gets into that enterprise. The defense also brought up Sean Combs' drug addiction. Right. And so they're trying to prove that, he wasn't this mastermind the prostitute is painting him out to be. Rather, he was just suffering from this addiction. Do you think they're doing a good job in proving that? No, but it's early on in the trial. I think that they're going to, on their case, obviously put on that he had this drug problem. And so he didn't necessarily know or, wasn't orchestrating what was going on. I think that's going to be a hard sell. I think at one point they were tossing around that they were going to, do the defense of that. He was this individual and people wanted to take him down because he was successful. So they've tossed around a couple of different theories here. I think from the testimony, he did have a drug problem. I don't think that anybody's going to dispute that. But the fact that you have a drug problem is not a defense to doing criminal acts. Absolutely. Like having an alleged drug problem does not excuse rape or beating and assaults or any of that, correct? Absolutely. You're absolutely right. That's not a defense. You chose to take the drugs. Whether you have a problem with it or not, that doesn't give you any right to go out and harm somebody else, rape somebody, like you said, or any other crime. That's not a defense. Now, would they at sentencing possibly take that into consideration in sentencing? Yeah, maybe they could take that at sentencing into consideration. But at this stage, that's not a consideration. I think that's being floated to try to go at the RICO claim that it wasn't this organized enterprise that was doing this for the purpose of doing it. They're really trying to say that these are consenting adults and that the issue that happened in the hotel and the allegations of abuse were domestic violence. Now, remember, domestic violence is horrible as it is. He'd probably end up, even if they proved all of the claims, he's not going to serve substantial jail time or prison time for domestic violence. Unfortunately, looking at this, he probably should. But the reality is, it's a totally different game than if he's convicted of other charges of what he's actually on trial for. Now, we talked about that, they're most likely going to put a psychologist on the stand. What other legal experts could we potentially see in this trial? Well, the psychologist is probably going to be the only, and they may not put the psychologist on the stand. That's only whether they think that they there, and I don't know if there's a psychologist actually on the list. Because really, for the RICO, they don't need the psychologist. So the psychologist would only go if they feel like, say, and they're not going to be able to do it if they hadn't already disclosed and it wasn't on the list to start with. But it would go towards her reaction to counter those text messages. But remember, we've got all these other witnesses. It's cumulative because it's a pattern. It's multiple acts for racketeering. It's an enterprise for them to do it. So just because you have the witnesses that we've already heard, that we don't need to necessarily know their motive. I think they've put her on the stand first because A, she's pregnant and she could go into labor at any time, but B, because that was the one that, in my opinion, started all of this, her doing that civil case. And we have the video. We have that video of her in that hotel room in the hotel. That's very shocking to show the actual physical abuse. We need that extortion factor about him making the videos and then threatening to release the videos if they don't do what they want them to have done. That is a really key factor. So if we keep having people, oh, he kept the videos, and there are other text messages that he said, if I didn't do this or I told somebody this, that he was going to release the videos, they could get a conviction just from that, right? And then how many years could he get just from the extortion piece? He could get a lot of years because extortion is a part of the RICO, so he could get a lot of years for that. But life is trafficking with minors. That's life. So there has been, and I am not sure, I've heard different philosophies or theories or leaked information as to whether the prosecution plans on putting on any evidence related to the trafficking of the minors. So I'm not sure that if they're going to do that or they're not going to do, but we're going to see. But if there was trafficking of minors, he can get life in prison for trafficking of minors. Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. Again, Sean Combs denies all allegations. All allegations.